I'm going to try and make a video for my good friend Victor Lobo de Palma. If the dog will let me talk. No. You're gonna knock it over. Okay.
Come, Toby.
Okay, cut.
Yeah, sit. Sit.
Okay, I'm trying to make it. But Toby! Toby!
Sit.
Okay, I am going to try and make a video. I'm going to test out making a video for my good friend Victor Lobo de Palma on making panettone. And so I'm making a recipe that we found online, overnight panettone from King Arthur's flour. And got the ingredients weighed up and prepared here. So first thing we have is our starter, our sponge. That smells wonderful. And so this is the sponge, and you could say this has fermented, it's bubbling up. So that's had a 12-hour ferment on it. And I'm using lard instead of butter just because that's what I had handy, and flour and salt. And I have sugar here, and I'm going to add the sugar in. Let's get all that lovely sugar in. And I'm just going to blend this together a little bit. And the yeast is in here as well, instant yeast. And then I'm going to add the sponge and the egg, and I'm going to mix this into a dough. So I'm mixing this by hand because I do not have a mixer, but normally one would use a mixer for this. Right? A good dough mixer would be the best. Right? So I'm going to, hopefully the dog will not knock the whole camera over as we do this. Right? And I'll just have to do some editing it afterwards. So I'm just going to put all of that sponge in there. Sponge, pre-ferment, biga, all these different names that more or less mean the same thing. And here I have egg, water, and vanilla. I don't have any orange oil, so I'm just skipping that. I'm going to put some orange zest in with my dried fruit. And so now I'm just going to use the spatula to moisten this up a little bit, and then I'm going to knead the dough by hand. And it will then need to ferment for an hour to an hour and a half before we add the fruits in. Now the flour I'm using, I'm here in Canada. I'm using Canadian wheat flour, so the absorption rates are a little bit different. I'm going to have to add a little bit more water to it all, and I will show you when the dough is all done and kneaded. Okay, so when the dough is mixed, we've got a nice smooth dough ball. It's a fairly soft dough, and then we're going to cover this up. I'm going to let it rise for about an hour and a half before we add in the dried fruits. Okay, so we're back. The dough has risen. You can see it's risen up in the bowl, and this will help also to, it's important for the dough to rise, for the yeast to double. It produces fermented flavor. It helps produce lactic acid that helps keep it fresh, and it produces enzymes that help break down things to keep everything nice and moist and tender. But also letting the dough rise, it relaxes the dough, so it makes it easier to incorporate the fruit. So for the dried fruit, what I have here today is a combination of sultanas and chopped dates and chopped orange peel. And I put a little bit of orange zest in there because I don't have any of the orange oil. So I'm just going to incorporate all these fruits into the dough. What I did with these fruits last night, I like to macerate them a little bit to help give them some moisture and some additional flavor. Usually I'll use something like rum or triple sec or Grand Marnier. Didn't have any of those on hand, so I used some 15-year-old scotch. So this should taste very special, I would think. And so we're going to incorporate that into here as well. So let's get all those goodies. So you can see there's no liquid left over. Really, it's all absorbed by the fruit. It's just a tiny bit. For all of this fruit, for this panettone, I used less than half an ounce of scotch, really. So it's just to impart some moisture and flavor. And I've prepared a pan here. I don't have any of the tall cylindrical panettone pans that are usually used, so I'm using a silicone cake pan here that we have on hand, and so it's just going to make a little bit flatter loaf, but it'll still taste quite delicious. So now we're just going to fold the dough and turning the bowl to incorporate these fruits. Just folding it on top of each other. This is going to be a pretty soft and sticky dough. And you don't want to overwork the fruits either, because then they will become mushy, especially if you're doing this in a mixer. You will mush the fruits and they will get smashed up into the dough and discolor, and the dough will look all kind of dirty brown, right? So it will look like somebody went to the bathroom in your dough. You don't want that. You want the fruits to be visible in the panettone afterwards. Some panettone also use stick almonds sometimes. Regionally, it depends sort of where they are made, where they come from. Different areas of Italy have different fruits prominent. So in areas where there's a lot of orange groves, you may see more orange in the panettone. In the areas to the south where you're getting more, that's also where there's more oranges, but also other types of fruits. In the north is where it's more almonds, and also things like prunes and so on. So there you see, just mix that all up together. And if you're not using a silicone pan, of course you have to spray it first. Right? The paper molds are used as a way to bake the cake, the dough, in the container that it's going to be stored or sold in as well, and it helps to keep it fresh that way. So that's the need for the paper container. If you're just going to consume it as you make them, you can bake them without the paper as well. So we're going to put this into the container here. And I'm just going to put the whole thing here in the middle. Smooth it a bit. Make sure I get all that goodness in there. And then we're going to let this rise for an hour, and then we start the baking procedure. So we'll be back to see the finished panettone in the next segment. Okay? Cheers. Okay. Our panettone has risen. It's an hour. And now what I like to do is I like to brush it with a little bit of egg. It's just some beaten egg. Some people mix some milk in with it. When it's just raw egg or raw egg with very little milk, that's when you get a nice golden color and a nice shine on top as well. And we're going to put this into an oven preheated at 400 degrees. And then we're going to start the baking process, which is, as outlined in the recipe, is gradually the temperature is dropped. We need the high temperature in the beginning to get the cake to lift, to get it to rise, and then the rest is for browning and structure and drying out to firm it up so that it's not too wet and it doesn't collapse on itself. And so just gently with a brush, brush the egg wash on just to get a nice thin coating everywhere. You're only barely touching the dough with the brush. Excuse me. So just nicely brushed like that. And this will go in the oven, and we will have a look what we end up with when it's done. So as you can see, I had to use the tent or the foil myself because it was getting a little bit dark. And you can see you have a nice, beautiful deep brown color. Checked it with the thermometer. So I've got to 192, which is perfect. And I'll just be turning this out of the mold so that it can cool on a wire rack. If you're not using paper molds, you want to turn it out if you're using metal or silicone, because otherwise it will sweat in the mold as it cools, and that could go moldy and everything. So the best thing is to turn this out and then onto a wire screen to let it cool so that the bottom can breathe a little bit. And there you have a beautiful Panettone loaf, and when it's cool later on, we'll slice it open, see how it looks inside. Okay, thanks. Okay, Victor. Here you can see it's nice, it's finished, it's cool. It's got a nice golden color and everything. And now we can see if we cut it with a serrated knife. And you can see we have a nice moist interior with lots of fruit pieces, and now we can enjoy. Have fun, my friend. Make panettone for Christmas.